The wind blew softly across the wide plains as the sun sank behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The cowboy named Luke tightened his reins and looked across the horizon. He had been riding since morning, searching for a herd of missing cattle. Dust covered his boots, his hat hung low, and his horse snorted with exhaustion. Luke was known for being calm, brave, and kind-hearted, a man who lived by honesty and respect. As he rode through a narrow canyon, he noticed a figure lying near a cluster of rocks. At first he thought it was a traveler resting, but when he came closer, he realized it was a woman. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her hair tangled with dry grass. She looked weak and pale, her breathing slow and shallow. Luke quickly jumped off his horse and ran toward her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he said softly. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing deep brown eyes filled with pain and fear. Luke could tell she was from the Apache tribe. He had met a few Apache families before. They were proud and strong people who respected the land more than anyone. "Don't worry, you're safe," Luke said gently. He gave her water from his canteen, watching her drink slowly as her hands trembled. Her voice was faint when she tried to speak. They took everything," she whispered. Luke didn't ask questions right away. He just waited, letting her breathe and regain some strength. After a few minutes, the woman tried to sit up, but she gasped in pain. Luke noticed she was holding her side near her ribs. "You're hurt," he said. "Let me see what's wrong." She hesitated, her eyes uncertain, but the pain was too strong. Luke pulled his bandana off and gently checked her side. His heart tightened when he saw a deep swelling under her skin. It wasn't just a bruise, and it looked serious. "Look," he murmured in shock, calling softly to his horse for the small medical pouch he always carried. "It's swelling. Something's wrong here." He carefully touched the area, making sure not to hurt her. The woman winced but didn't push him away. Luke realized she might have been thrown from a horse or struck during an attack. He had seen such injuries before during border skirmishes. "You need help," he said. "You can't stay here." The woman looked at him with tired eyes and shook her head weakly. "They'll find me," she said. "If I go, they'll find me again." Luke didn't understand fully, but he could see she was terrified. He looked around. The canyon was quiet. The only sounds were the distant cries of crows and the whisper of wind through dry grass. "No one's coming now," he said firmly. "You'll be safe. I'll take you to the ranch. We've got a doctor there." The woman hesitated again, but finally nodded. She trusted the kindness in his eyes more than the fear that haunted her. He lifted her carefully onto his horse, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. As they began to ride, Luke's mind raced. What had happened to her? Who had done this? He had heard stories about conflicts between settlers and native tribes, but this felt different. This was personal. She wasn't just running from danger. She was running from something deeper, something hidden. The journey back to the ranch was slow. The sun disappeared completely and the moon rose high over the plains. Luke kept talking softly to her, trying to keep her awake. "What's your name?" he asked gently. After a pause, she answered, "Nita." Her voice was soft but steady. "That's a strong name," Luke said with a smile. "You'll be all right, Nita, I promise." When they reached the ranch, Luke carried her inside. The old ranch house was simple. Wooden walls, oil lamps, and the smell of hay drifting in from the barn. His sister Mary came running when she saw them. "What happened?" she asked. Luke quickly explained, and Mary fetched clean cloth and hot water. Together they tended to Nita's wounds. She flinched at first, but soon her breathing slowed as the warmth and care soothed her pain. Mary whispered, "She's been through a lot. Look at those marks, and someone must have hurt her." Luke nodded grimly. He cleaned the wound gently, wrapping it carefully. When he pressed near the swelling, Nita gasped again and he stopped immediately. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'll be careful." Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment something passed between them. Trust. Later that night, after Nita had fallen asleep, Luke sat by the fire thinking about what she had said earlier. "They'll find me." Who was they? Bandits? Soldiers? He didn't know yet, but he was determined to find out. The moonlight glowed through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. He glanced toward Nita's resting form. She looked peaceful now, but he knew her troubles were far from over. Luke sighed and poured himself a cup of coffee. He looked out at the silent prairie and whispered to himself, Whoever did this, they won't touch her again. The quiet promise hung in the air as the wind howled softly outside. As dawn approached, Nita stirred in her sleep, whispering something in her language. Words Luke couldn't understand, but they sounded like a prayer. The first light of morning crept over the horizon, touching everything with gold. It felt like a new beginning, though Luke didn't know that the next few days would uncover secrets he never expected. Secrets that would test his courage, his loyalty, and his heart. That night had changed everything. What started as a simple search for missing cattle had turned into something far greater. A story of pain, courage, and unexpected friendship that would soon unfold across the dusty plains of the wild frontier. The next morning, soft sunlight poured into the ranch house through the small window. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. Luke had been up for hours, fixing the broken fence and checking on the cattle. But his mind kept wandering back to the woman sleeping in the guest room. Nita had looked peaceful when he peeked in earlier, her breathing steady, her face no longer pale like the night before. Still, he could see the pain she carried, not only in her wounds but also in her heart. Mary was sitting at the table, sewing an old shirt when Luke came in. "She's awake," Mary said quietly, glancing toward the small room. She asked where she is. Luke nodded, took off his hat and went to check on Nita. She was sitting up on the bed, wrapped in a blanket. Her dark hair fell loosely around her shoulders and her eyes, though tired, were alert. When she saw Luke, she tried to smile but winced slightly from the pain in her ribs. "Good morning," he said gently. "You're safe here. This is my ranch near Red Mesa." Nita nodded slowly. "You helped me," she said in a quiet voice. "I owe you thanks." Luke shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Anyone would have done the same." She looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. After a few moments, Luke poured her a cup of warm tea and handed it to her. "If you feel strong enough," he said, "can you tell me what happened out there?" Nita's eyes darkened. She stared at the cup for a long moment before answering. "My village was attacked," she said finally. "We had been warned that riders were coming, but we didn't believe it. They took our horses, our food, everything. Some were hurt, some didn't make it." Her voice broke slightly, and Luke's chest tightened. "I tried to help my brother," she continued. "But one of the men hit me. I fell. When I woke up, everything was burning. I walked for 2 days before I found that canyon." Luke listened quietly, not interrupting. He could feel the pain in every word she spoke. "Do you know who they were?" he asked gently. Nita shook her head. "They wore no colors, no uniforms. They spoke English, but not all of them." Mary, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped in and placed a hand on Nita's shoulder. "You don't have to talk about it now," she said softly. "You need to rest." But Nita shook her head. "No, you should know. They may come this way. They're searching for something. Or someone." Luke exchanged a serious look with Mary. "What do you mean?" he asked. Nita hesitated. "Before the attack, one of the elders found something strange near the river. A metal box buried under stones. He said it wasn't ours and that it belonged to the white men. We didn't open it, but the next day those riders came." Luke frowned, rubbing his chin. "A metal box?" he repeated. "Maybe that's what they were after." He felt a spark of anger. "And they burned your village for it?" Nita nodded slowly, her eyes full of quiet sorrow. For the rest of the day, Luke couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. He went out to check the ranch boundaries, his eyes scanning the distant hills. The land looked peaceful, but something felt wrong, like danger was hiding behind the calm. That afternoon, a rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch. It was Tom, one of Luke's neighbors and an old friend. "Morning, Luke," Tom called, pulling up beside him. "Heard you were out late yesterday. Everything all right?" Luke hesitated, then said, "Found a woman out near Red Rock Canyon. She's hurt. Said her village was attacked." Tom's expression turned serious. "I heard rumors," he said. "A few folks in town said there was smoke near the Apache settlement. Sheriff's been asking questions. Some folks think bandits are moving through the area." "Bandits?" Luke repeated. "What for?" Tom shrugged. "Could be gold, could be land. You know how it is, and someone always wants more." He tipped his hat. "Be careful, Luke. If you've got someone from the Apache tribe staying here, the wrong people might start talking." After Tom left, Luke stood for a long time, staring at the road. He knew his friend was right. There were still men in town who didn't trust the Apache people. If they found out Nita was here, it could cause trouble. That evening, as the sun went down, Luke returned to the house. Nita was sitting by the fire, braiding a small piece of straw between her fingers. She looked up when he came in. "Your sister is kind," she said softly. "You both are." Luke smiled faintly. "You're welcome here as long as you need." She hesitated, then said, "You shouldn't risk that. If they come, they'll bring danger to you." Luke shook his head. "I've faced danger before. You're safe here?" Silence filled the room for a moment, broken only by the crackling fire. Then Nita said something unexpected. "The box they took," she whispered. "It wasn't just metal. My brother saw inside before they came. He said there were papers, maps maybe, something with drawings and marks. He thought it was about land." Luke's brow furrowed. "Land maps? Around here?" "Yes," she said. "He thought someone wanted to take land from our people. Maybe from your ranch, too." Luke leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words sinking in. The government had been surveying land for new settlements, but he never imagined they'd send men to steal or kill for it. "If what you say is true," he said slowly, "then this isn't just about your village. It's about all of us." That night, Luke couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the faint sound of the wind outside, mixed with the memory of Nita's voice. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, and the horses in the barn shifted nervously. Luke got up, grabbed his rifle, and stepped outside. The moon hung high, casting silver light across the fields. He walked to the edge of the fence and froze. Far away, near the ridge, a small glimmer of light flashed, like the reflection of metal. Someone was out there, watching. He waited, his eyes fixed on the hill, but the light vanished after a moment. Luke stayed there for a long time, listening, until finally he turned back toward the house. Inside, Nita was awake, standing by the window. "You saw it too," she said quietly. Luke nodded. "We're not alone." Nita looked down, fear flickering across her face. "They've found me." Luke walked over and placed a reassuring hand on the table beside her. "Not yet," he said firmly. "They might be looking, but this is my land. No one gets past here without me knowing." She nodded slowly, trusting him, though worry still clouded her eyes. Luke loaded his rifle and leaned it against the door. "Get some rest," he told her. "Tomorrow we'll go into town and speak to the sheriff. Maybe we can stop this before it gets worse." As he sat by the dying fire, Luke knew things were changing. What started as an act of kindness was becoming a fight for justice, not just for Nita, but for everyone who called this land home. And deep inside, he felt that this was only the beginning of something much larger, something that would test the courage of both their hearts in the days to come. The morning came quietly, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was waiting behind the hills. Luke stood outside the ranch house, staring toward the distant ridge where he had seen that glimmer of light the night before. His instincts told him that whoever had attacked Nita's village wasn't far. The ranch, which had always been peaceful, now felt tense, like danger was hiding in the shadows. Inside, Mary was helping Nita prepare for their trip to town. Nita looked better. Some color had returned to her face, and though she still moved carefully, the strength in her eyes had returned. She wore one of Mary's dresses, simple but clean, and her long dark hair was tied back neatly. "Are you sure we should go?" Mary asked as she packed a small bag. "If those men are nearby, it could be risky." Nita looked toward the window. "If we do nothing, they'll come here," she said quietly. "The sheriff needs to know what happened." Luke stepped in, nodding. "She's right. We can't hide forever." They saddled 2 horses, and Luke helped Nita up. The ride to town was long, nearly 2 hours across the open plains. The wind blew steadily, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry dust. Nita stayed quiet for most of the journey, her eyes scanning the horizon. Every sound made her tense, but Luke kept close beside her, his hand resting near his rifle. When they finally reached Red Mesa town, people turned to look. It was a small place, a few shops, a saloon, a blacksmith, and the sheriff's office. The townsfolk weren't used to seeing a cowboy ride in with an Apache woman beside him. Some stared, whispering to one another, but Luke ignored them. He led Nita straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dalton was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He looked up from his desk when Luke entered. "Morning, Luke," he said. "You look like you've got something serious on your mind." Luke nodded and gestured to Nita. "This is Nita. She's from the Apache settlement north of here." Her village was attacked a few days ago. She barely made it out alive. Dalton's face grew stern. Attacked by who? Nita spoke quietly but clearly. They came at night. They took horses, burned our homes, and killed anyone who tried to stop them. They were not soldiers, but they spoke English. The sheriff leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. I've heard rumors of bandits moving through the area, he said. They hit a trading post last month. Could be the same group. Luke crossed his arms. They were looking for something, he said. She mentioned a metal box with papers and maps inside. Her people found it near the river before the attack. Dalton's expression changed slightly. Maps, you say? He asked. Do you know what kind? Nita shook her head. Only my brother saw it. He said it had strange markings, lines and names in English. The sheriff stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a folder. You might want to see this, he said. He opened it on the table. Inside were reports about missing survey maps, documents stolen from a government wagon that had been ambushed 2 weeks ago. If this is the same thing, Dalton said slowly, those men weren't just thieves. They were hired. Hired? Luke asked. By who? Dalton sighed. Can't say for sure, but someone's been paying men to clear out land between here and the river. The government's planning to sell it to a mining company. If the Apache village was on that land, he trailed off, letting the thought finish itself. Nita's eyes widened. They burned our homes to take the land? The sheriff nodded grimly. It's possible. If those papers showed that your village stood on valuable ground, someone might have wanted you gone. Luke clenched his fists. That's not right. Those people lived there for generations. Dalton looked at him carefully. I'll do what I can, Luke, but you know how things work. Without proof, the men behind this will walk free. Nita stood, her voice trembling but strong. Then I'll find proof. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. That's dangerous talk, miss. Luke placed a hand on the table. We'll find it together, he said firmly. Tell me where those survey maps were taken from. Dalton hesitated, then handed him a map. If I were you, I'd start near the old river crossing. That's where the wagon disappeared. But be careful. If those men are still looking for the maps, they won't let anyone get close. After leaving the office, Luke and Nita walked through town. People still watched them, but Luke didn't care. He bought supplies and food, rope, and extra ammunition. When he returned to the horses, Nita was standing near the well, staring at the distant hills. You don't have to come, Luke said quietly. You've been through enough. She turned to him, her eyes steady. Those men took everything from my people. If there's even a chance to make them answer for it, I have to go. Luke nodded. He admired her courage. Then we ride tomorrow, he said. At dawn. That night they camped on the edge of town. The fire crackled softly and the stars spread wide above them. Luke sat sharpening his knife while Nita stared into the flames. Do you think justice exists out here? She asked suddenly. Luke looked up. Sometimes, he said. But it doesn't come easy. You have to fight for it. She nodded slowly, then whispered, My brother used to say the same. He always believed the truth would find a way to the light. The next morning they set out toward the river crossing. The land grew rougher. Dry gullies, rocky slopes, and scattered mesquite trees. By noon the sound of rushing water reached their ears. The river shimmered under the sun, wide and muddy from the recent rains. Luke dismounted and studied the ground. There were old wagon tracks half buried under sand. This must be the place, he said. Nita walked beside him, scanning the area. After a few minutes, she pointed. There, she said. A few pieces of wood lay near the bank, the remains of a wagon wheel. They searched carefully. Luke dug near the rocks where the tracks ended, while Nita looked around the trees. The sun burned overhead and sweat dripped down their faces. Then, just as Luke was about to give up, Nita called out, Luke! Over here! He ran to where she was kneeling. In the dirt, half covered by roots, was something metallic. They dug it out together, a small iron box, rusted but intact. Luke wiped off the dirt, and sure enough, it matched the description she had given. This has to be it, he said. Nita's hands trembled as he opened the latch. Inside were old papers, maps with markings, lines, and notes written in neat handwriting. It's real, Luke whispered. This is what they were after. Before they could say more, a sound echoed through the canyon, the sharp crack of a rifle. The bullet hit the ground near Luke's boots, spraying dust into the air. Down! He shouted, pulling Nita behind a rock. 3 riders appeared on the ridge dressed in dark coats and wide hats. One of them shouted, "Hand over the box, cowboy, and maybe we'll let you walk away." Luke loaded his rifle and shouted back, "You'll have to come take it." The men fired again, bullets whizzing past their heads. Nita clutched the box tightly, her heart pounding. Luke returned fire, forcing the riders to scatter for cover. "We can't stay here," he said. "Head for the river." Together they ran through the tall grass toward the water, the sound of gunfire echoing behind them. The box felt heavy in Nita's hands, but she didn't let go. When they reached the riverbank, Luke turned and fired one last shot, hitting the nearest rider's hat clean off his head. The attackers hesitated, then rode back toward the hills, disappearing into the distance. Luke and Nita stood catching their breath, soaked in sweat and fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, but they know we have it now." Luke looked at the box in her hands. "Then we'd better make sure it reaches someone who can't be bought," he said firmly. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep orange, they sat beside the river, both exhausted but alive. In Luke's mind, one thought kept repeating. This was far from over. The truth they had uncovered was dangerous, and now they were part of something much bigger than either of them had imagined. The night air was cool as Luke and Nita sat beside the river, both still shaken from the fight. The fire they had built was small, just enough to keep away the cold. The sound of rushing water filled the silence between them. Luke stared into the flames, his jaw tight. "They knew we'd come here," he said quietly. "Someone must have told them." Nita nodded slowly, her hands wrapped around the small iron box. "Maybe someone in town," she said. "They were watching us. I saw men near the well when we left." Luke looked up at her. The firelight flickered across her face, tired yet strong. "Then we can't go back to Red Mesa," he said. "If they know the sheriff is helping us, he could be in danger too." Nita looked down at the box in her hands. "These papers," she said softly, "they hold the truth. My people died for this. We can't let them take it again." Luke reached over and placed his hand on hers. "We won't," he promised. "We'll take it somewhere safe, maybe to the fort 2 days from here. The army keeps records. If they see what's inside, they'll have to stop whoever's behind this." Nita met his eyes and nodded. There was something unspoken between them, not romance, but a deep understanding born from shared danger. They both knew the road ahead would be hard, but neither was willing to give up. The next morning, the sun rose golden and bright over the plains. Luke saddled the horses while Nita packed the few things they had. The box was wrapped in cloth and tied to her saddlebag. As they set out, the air felt calm, almost too calm. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, dotted with tall grass and scattered rocks. They rode in silence for a while, listening to the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves. Every so often, Luke glanced over his shoulder, scanning the horizon for movement. He had learned long ago that danger didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waited quietly just out of sight. Around midday, they stopped near a small grove of cottonwood trees to rest. Nita filled her canteen at a stream while Luke checked the tracks behind them. "Someone's following," he said when he returned. "2 riders, maybe 3. They're keeping their distance." Nita's face tightened with worry. "They won't stop until they have the box." Luke nodded grimly. "Then we'll make sure they never get close enough." They mounted again and rode harder, cutting through dry ravines and over rocky slopes. The sun beat down mercilessly and dust rose behind them like a trail of smoke. Hours passed and their shadows grew long across the ground. Still, the riders behind them didn't disappear. By late afternoon, they reached the foothills leading toward the fort. The landscape changed. Tall red cliffs rose around them, casting long shadows across the ground. Luke guided the horses carefully through a narrow canyon. The walls were steep and echoes bounced off the rocks with every step. "This way," he said, pointing ahead. "Once we cross this pass, we'll be half a day from the fort." But before they could reach the other side, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Then came the thunder of hooves. From both sides of the canyon, armed men appeared, 5 of them blocking the path ahead and behind. Luke pulled his horse around and drew his rifle. "Stay behind me," he shouted. One of the men, tall and dressed in a brown coat, rode forward. His face was rough and weathered, his voice cold. "You've caused quite a stir, cowboy," he said. "Now hand over that box and maybe I'll let you and the lady live." Luke didn't move. "You'll have to take it," he said evenly. The man laughed. "Brave words, but you're outnumbered. Nita gripped the reins tightly, her heart pounding. She could see the determination in Luke's eyes. He wasn't going to surrender. The men began to spread out, circling them slowly. Luke waited, his finger near the trigger. "I don't want trouble," he said, "but I won't let you hurt her." "Then you've already got trouble," the man replied. The next second, chaos erupted. A gunshot echoed through the canyon. Luke fired back, hitting one of the riders' hats clean off. Nita ducked as bullets struck the rocks around them, sending fragments flying. The horses reared in fear, neighing loudly. Luke grabbed Nita's arm. "This way," he shouted. They turned down a narrow path leading deeper into the canyon. Dust swirled around them as they raced between the rocks. The men followed close behind, shouting orders. The path split into two, one leading upward toward a ridge, the other deeper into the canyon. "Up there," Luke said, pointing toward the ridge. "We'll have the high ground." They climbed fast, the horses struggling against the slope. When they reached the top, Luke turned and fired again, forcing the men below to scatter. "Keep moving," he called. Nita's horse stumbled and she almost lost her grip on the box. Luke jumped down, helping her steady it. "You all right?" he asked quickly. She nodded, breathing hard. "I won't let it fall," she said. Together they scrambled across the ridge until they reached a cluster of boulders large enough to hide behind. The gunfire below grew faint. For a few minutes it seemed they had escaped. Luke crouched beside her, reloading his rifle. "We'll wait here until night," he said. "They won't risk climbing up in the dark." Nita sat quietly, her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she whispered. "My people, they only wanted to live in peace." Luke looked at her with calm eyes. "You didn't cause this, Nita. Greed did. And greed's got a way of destroying everything it touches." As the sun began to set, painting the cliffs red and gold, the sounds of the men below faded into the distance. Luke and Nita took turns keeping watch. The night air grew colder and the wind howled through the rocks like a warning. Around midnight, Nita whispered, "Luke, look, down below." She could see campfires, 3 of them, glowing faintly in the dark canyon. The men hadn't left. They were waiting. "They'll block the pass," Luke said quietly. "We can't go back down that way." "Then what do we do?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "There's an old trail on the other side of the ridge," he said. "It's steep, but it leads toward the river again. If we can make it there before dawn, we might lose them." They packed their things quickly and led the horses along the narrow ridge. The moon lit their path just enough to see. The trail was dangerous. One wrong step could send them tumbling down the cliffs. But they moved carefully, step by step, until the ground began to level. By the time the first light of dawn touched the sky, they were far from the canyon. Exhausted, they stopped to rest near a line of cottonwoods by the riverbank. Luke tied the horses and looked back toward the hills. "We made it," he said softly. "For now." Nita sat beside him, holding the box close to her chest. "They'll keep coming, won't they?" she asked. Luke nodded. "Until someone powerful enough sees what's inside. Once the truth's out, they'll have no reason to chase you anymore." She looked at him with quiet determination. "Then we keep going," she said. "No matter how far." Luke smiled faintly. "You're stronger than most people I know." The sun climbed higher, shining on the endless plains before them. Their journey was far from over, but hope flickered in their hearts. They had survived another day, and with every mile they rode, they came closer to revealing the truth. A truth that could bring justice to Nita's people and peace to a land torn by greed and lies. As they rode toward the horizon, the wind followed them, carrying the soft whisper of the river and the promise of a new dawn. The sun rose slowly over the plains, casting a warm golden glow across the land. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the sound of birds singing in the distance. Luke and Nita rode side by side, both tired but determined. They had been on the trail for 2 days since escaping the canyon, moving mostly at dawn and dusk to avoid being seen. The box was still with them, tied tightly to Nita's saddle, and its weight seemed to carry not just papers but the fate of 2 worlds, her people's and his. Luke glanced at her. She sat tall on her horse, though he could see exhaustion in her eyes. "You holding up?" he asked gently. Nita nodded. "I'm fine. I've walked harder paths before." Her voice was quiet but steady. Luke smiled faintly. "You've got more grit than half the men I know," he said. That made her smile for a moment, the first real smile he had seen since they met. As the day went on, They approached a stretch of open prairie. Far in the distance, Luke could see smoke rising in the fort. Relief flooded through him. "There it is," he said, pointing ahead. "Fort Claymore. Once we get there, we'll be safe." But Nita didn't look convinced. "Do you trust the soldiers?" she asked. "If they work for the same people who want this land, we might be walking into danger." Luke thought about that. "You're right," he said slowly. "We'll have to be careful. Not everyone in uniform is honest. But the captain there, Captain Harris, he's a good man. He helped settle a land dispute for us last year. If anyone will listen, it's him." They continued on until the sun was high in the sky. The land around them was quiet, peaceful, almost too still. Then out of nowhere, the horses began to snort and shift nervously. Luke turned quickly, scanning the horizon, and his heart sank. Behind them, in the distance, dust was rising again. Riders. At least 4, maybe 5. The same men from the canyon. "They found us," he said sharply. "Go, ride!" Nita urged her horse forward, clutching the box tight. Luke followed close behind, the pounding of hooves echoing across the plains. The riders shouted, their voices carried by the wind. Bullets whistled past them, kicking up dirt and rocks. Luke fired back once, forcing them to scatter, but they were gaining ground fast. The fort was still several miles away. The land offered no cover, just open grass and scattered hills. "Head for the ridge," Luke shouted. "We'll make our stand there." They pushed the horses hard until they reached a low ridge overlooking a shallow valley. Luke jumped down, helping Nita dismount. "Stay low," he said, loading his rifle. The riders approached quickly, spreading out to surround them. The leader, the same man in the brown coat, called out again. "You're running out of places to hide, cowboy. Hand over that box." Luke shouted back. "You've already taken too much from good people. You'll have to kill me to get it." The man laughed coldly. "That can be arranged." He raised his arm and his men began to fire. The air filled with gunfire and dust. Luke returned shot after shot, careful and steady. Nita crouched behind a rock, clutching the box, her heart pounding so hard it felt like thunder in her chest. She saw Luke reload again and again, each time standing his ground even as bullets tore through the dry grass around him. One of the riders tried to rush forward, but Luke's shot caught his hat, sending it spinning into the air. The man pulled back, cursing. Another bullet struck Luke's arm, grazing him. He gritted his teeth but didn't stop. "I'm all right," he called to Nita, though she could see blood running down his sleeve. The fight went on for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Then in the distance came a sound, faint but clear. The deep, steady beat of drums. Nita's eyes widened. "The soldiers," she gasped. Luke turned. From the east, dust clouds rose again, but this time they came with the gleam of sunlight reflecting off rifles and banners. The fort's patrol had seen the gunfire. The riders realized it too. The man in the brown coat cursed loudly. "Fall back," he shouted. "We'll finish this later." They turned their horses and galloped away, vanishing over the ridge just as the soldiers arrived. Captain Harris, a tall man with a calm but firm expression, rode up first. "Luke, what in blazes happened here?" he demanded. Luke lowered his rifle, breathing hard. "Bandits," he said. "They've been attacking settlements, Apache villages too. We've got proof." He pointed toward Nita, who held out the box with trembling hands. Harris took it carefully and opened it. Inside were the same maps, but now they could see more clearly, each one marked with survey lines and names of landowners. The captain's eyes darkened. "These are government documents," he said. "Where did you find them?" Nita spoke quietly. "My people found it near the river. Then they came. They burned everything." The captain closed the box and looked between them. "If what you're saying is true, then this isn't just bandits. Someone's using hired guns to clear land for sale. I'll take this to the commanding office myself." Luke nodded, his voice firm. "Make sure they answer for it, Captain. Every last one of them." Harris gave him a long look. "You've done a brave thing, Luke, both of you." He ordered a few men to take them back to the fort for medical care. That night, under the protection of the fort, the air felt calmer. The soldiers treated Luke's wound and gave Nita a place to rest. For the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. The next morning, Harris met them in his office. His face was serious, but there was relief in his eyes. "We sent word to the district marshal," he said. "Those maps are now official evidence. It looks like a company based out of Denver paid men to scare tribes and settlers off the land. They'll be facing a full investigation. Nita listened quietly, her eyes glistening. So my people will be safe? She asked. Harris nodded. No one will touch their land again. I'll make sure of it. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Luke stood beside her, his hat in his hand. "You did this," he said softly. "You fought for them." Nita turned to him with a small smile. "We both did." After a few days, when the danger had passed, Luke prepared to head back to his ranch. Nita walked with him to the edge of the fort. The morning sun painted everything in warm gold. "You'll go back home now," she said. He nodded. "And you? What will you do?" She looked toward the mountains in the distance. "My people will rebuild. There's a place near the river. The soil is good, the water clear. We'll start again," Luke smiled. "If you ever need help, you know where to find me." Nita looked up at him. "I know," she said. "And if you ever lose your way, look for the smoke from our fires. It will mean you still have friends among the Apache." He chuckled softly. "I'll remember that." They stood in silence for a while, the wind moving gently through the grass. Then she held out her hand. Luke took it, his rough palm closing around hers. No words were needed. The look between them said everything. As he rode away, Luke glanced back one last time. Nita stood there, watching, her figure outlined against the morning sky. She looked strong and unbroken, a symbol of everything he admired: courage, hope, and the will to stand for what's right. When he reached the top of the hill, he stopped and looked at the wide land stretching before him. The plains shimmered under the sunlight, endless and free. Somewhere out there, life would go on. The cattle would graze, the rivers would run, and people, no matter how different, would keep fighting for a place to belong. Luke tipped his hat toward the horizon. "Rest easy, Nita," he murmured. "You made sure the truth lived." Then he rode off, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared into the golden light of the new day, a lone cowboy carrying the memory of a brave woman and the promise of justice that had finally found its way across the wild frontier.